It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Ritchie right to the rim, driving score!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here's your host, Mitch Harper, on Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Good afternoon, Cougar Nation. Welcome on into Cougar Sports Saturday. It's Valentine's Day. It's a day of love. Hopefully you love Cougar Sports Saturday. Appreciate all of you for being on board to the show today. It's a BYU basketball game day as we get you ready for BYU versus Colorado. Tip-off at 2 o'clock, pregame at 1. We'll toss it over to Greg Rebell and the crew coming up at the top of the hour, but we'll be taking over the airwaves over this next hour, myself and Nate Slack. How you doing today, Nate?
I'm doing pretty good, Mitch. It's been a busy week. I think most weeks are when you're in the middle of basketball season and all the news that's broke, but doing pretty good today.
I'm glad to hear that. And, you know, on this Valentine's Day where, you know, it's a day of love, you start to think of things that you love and you like and all that stuff on Valentine's Day. One thing that we don't like to discuss on this sort of show is, well, off the field issues. And there was a big story this week, a jarring bombshell of a story involving former BYU wide receiver Parker Kingston. That's right, former BYU wide receiver Parker Kingston, because as of Friday night, Kingston officially dismissed from the BYU football team and no longer a student at Brigham Young University. That just coming days after Kingston on Wednesday, February 11th, was arrested and charged with first-degree felony rape. He then appeared in court on Friday, February 13th, virtually from a Washington County jail, and it was in reference to an alleged incident with an alleged victim. That name was not disclosed, from a woman that took place on February 23rd, 2025. It's been an ongoing investigation, and officials in Washington County pursued those charges and arrested Parker Kingston. Now, he did get bail yesterday and is required to have a GPS ankle monitor, but hours after that court appearance, BYU announced on Friday night that he's no longer a student at Brigham Young University or a member of the BYU football team. So much to kind of unpack there, Nate, but your thoughts of just the wild turn of events that this has been this past week with Parker Kingston.
My initial reaction was just I was shocked, right? It came out at around 5 o'clock on Wednesday. So I was driving home from work. I get to a red light and just kind of whip out my phone because I had some buzzing on my watch. And I just see the headline of an article saying that Parker Kingston's been arrested. And I'm thinking, what? And then the light turns green. So I got to put away my phone and I'm driving for the next 10 minutes just going, what is going on? It's so difficult, Mitch, because you look at these guys on the football field and they're one person, but this is not a football issue. And it's easy to forget that these athletes, especially with how much they're getting paid, at the end of the day, they're young. You know, Parker's 21 years old. And these are huge consequences at stake if he's convicted. And there's so many victims, whether you're looking at the alleged victim, if you're looking at Parker's fiance. I mean, he was at the basketball game with Houston just a week ago today, and they're up on the jumbo screen and everybody's taking pictures and getting stories out about Parker being engaged. You've got Parker's family and Parker himself. It's just a difficult situation. And you know, luckily we live somewhere where everything's going to be played out in court. They'll have Parker will be able to tell his side, try to clear his name, but it's good that you know these things are not rushed. They're well thought out. Parker's going to have his legal team. She's going to have her team, but they'll be able to share all the facts, and hopefully those facts come out soon. And that we'll be able to just kind of move on. And I don't mean to say that insensitively, but I think everybody involved is just kind of looking forward to the day where they can put this behind them and move on with whatever that may be.
It's a difficult situation. There's no question about it. And I think it brings up thoughts and memories of last summer when former BYU quarterback Jake Retzloff was facing allegations. But what was different here compared to the Retzloff situation, that was a civil lawsuit. And, it came out that Jake, from his side of his perspective, he said it was consensual sex, and that led to an honor code violation. His civil lawsuit was dismissed. He got a 7-game suspension and exited BYU. He landed at Tulane, led the Green Wave to a college football playoff. So when this story came out, and then you add the element of criminal charges, first-degree felony rape, as the judge yesterday during Parker Kingston's court appearance, Nate, said these charges face 5 years to life in Utah State Prison. Jake Retzloff, awful accusations thrown at his name in a civil lawsuit. At no point, though, was he facing any jail time. I just think it adds a different level of intensity when you're facing 5 years to life. And, Parker Kingston now with an ankle monitor, and he's going to have his next court appearance on February 25th at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time. So that's about, 11 days from now, which 2 days before spring ball starts. And, when I heard that date, I'm just thinking to myself, I wonder if BYU is going to, make an announcement on his status, because with the Jake Retzloff situation last year in civil lawsuit, it was a little bit of gray area at times, because again, then it just, once the case was dismissed, then it focused really on the aspect of the honor code because of the, consensual sex piece that Jake Retzloff was stating. From Parker Kingston's situation, again, it's all allegations, it's all alleged. And Parker Kingston's point of view and what he told, it was stated in these unsealed documents that have been revealed in the court case, that Kingston said that it was consensual sex with this alleged victim that occurred back on February 23rd, 2025. There's the honor code piece, but then all of this too. So it's like BYU, I think, had to make an announcement. And I think in this situation, it probably was the right move. And with it being noted, Nate, of February 23rd, 2025, that was a long time ago. That was almost a year ago. BYU had an entire football season in between that time. And Kingston was BYU's leading receiver this past season. BYU, along with announcing that Kingston was no longer a student at Brigham Young University or a member of the BYU football team, the school also announced on Friday night, quote, University administration and athletic administration, including BYU head coach Kalani Sitake, were only made aware of the investigation and allegations after Kingston's arrest this past Wednesday, February 11th, end quote. So that's BYU's statement there. Again, I think, it's a lot to digest, Nate, and at BYU, as you know, going to be moving forward without Parker Kingston.
Yeah, and speaking on the football front, you don't want to move away from this too quickly, but obviously it is a sports show, and we have to talk about the football aspect as well. I think there's two silver linings for the football program with how this has gone. Just the news last night, moving on from Parker, letting him do this battle, so the football team can move on. Because I think last year it was really difficult for the program with the Jake situation, because Jake hung around for a couple months after the civil lawsuit came out. And so everything was kind of up in the air. And is BYU going to have a quarterback? And if not, who do they go with? They got basically 4 guys who were unproven. And I think the benefit with this situation for the football side of things is they're going to have an entire spring ball to be able to figure out how the pecking order is going to go with the wide receiver room. And they didn't have that opportunity last year, because when Jake Retzloff's situation broke, it was after spring ball had already ended. So it wasn't going to be until fall camp when they were able to finally do battles and go to practice. The second thing I think is that this team has been through this before. It's obviously going to be a mental challenge for the next little bit, just kind of adjusting to life without Parker in the wide receiver room. I think a lot of people were going to be looking at him for coaching and things during the offseason. Obviously, that's not going to be taking place anymore. But I think the team has a mental toughness to handle this better than they would have otherwise, because they went through the same thing last year. And it's a starting wide receiver. Last year was a starting quarterback. They kind of learned how they can navigate these waters. And I think especially being able to move on, say he's not going to be part of this football team in 2026. So let's get out there and try to fill his shoes. I think those are both benefits that BYU football is going to be able to experience.
Good thoughts there from Nate Slack. I also say, too, that I think for Cougar Nation out there, I think in this situation, too, when Retzloff was facing his situation, that was in basically the dead of the offseason in terms of no sporting events. And I'm not saying that you should be distracted. I mean, because if you don't want to pay attention to this, I think it can be a little bit easier as a fan to just, hey, watch BYU basketball today. And whereas last year with Jake, that any talking point with BYU football centered on that. Whereas BYU football is going to hit the field in a couple weeks. In 13 days, they're going to be out on the practice fields competing in spring ball. And not to say that this is going to be completely shoved to the side, but I think that you can talk about real football soon. Whereas last summer, the whole summer was just centered around Jake, and that naturally comes with the quarterback position, how everything ties to that. But I think that's a little bit different this year, where fans don't have to feel as down and out and try to avoid, the talking points of, just getting excited for a season. There's still reason to be excited, really excited for this BYU football team in 2026, because I still believe, even without Parker Kingston, this can be a really good football team, and they get the chance to start building that coming up in 2 weeks with the start of spring ball. But that's the latest in regards to Parker Kingston. On the other side, we'll start to get to BYU basketball. It's a special day for a BYU legend. Jimmer Fredette will hit on that next. And coming up around the corner, Dave Rose, former BYU head coach, will join the program here on Cougar Sports Saturday on KSL News Radio. Welcome into Cougar Sports Saturday here on KSL News Radio. Coming up today, BYU basketball against the Colorado Buffaloes, 2 p.m. tip-off. And at halftime, the legend, Jimmer Fredette, is going to be honored at the Marriott Center and have his jersey retired and hanging in the rafters. Mitch Harper, Nate Slack with you today. Jimmer is a BYU legend in every sense of the word. Nate, how excited are you to see Jimmer getting this recognition, to have his jersey hanging forever at the Marriott Center?
It is about time, Mitch. We've been talking about this basically every year for the last 15. When is BYU going to retire Jimmer's jersey? And it just brings back so many memories. He's one of those players where every time I see a video of him pop up on social media, immediate share, right? You have to share it immediately. You're talking about him every single March Madness. Anytime BYU plays at Arizona, you're going to talk about his performance in the McHale Center. You're going to talk about his half-court shot every time BYU plays Utah. He's just one of those players that gets brought up, I think, more often than people realize. It's like one of those things, Mitch, when you are talking with somebody and they mention some restaurant, you're like, oh, I've never heard of that before. And then you go on with life, and then you start realizing just how many times you're seeing those commercials or the billboards or other people are talking about it. I think Jimmer is just one of those names where we talk about him all the time without realizing just how much we talk about him. But I'm so excited to be in the Marriott Center, to watch his jersey go up in the rafters, because he's earned it, man. I mean, of all the BYU players that I've been able to see in my lifetime with my own eyes, I can't think of any more that deserve it more than Jimmer.
No question. I think that Jimmer Fredette, in my lifetime too, hands down, the best BYU basketball player. I think there's an argument to be made that AJ he is probably a better all-around player. But I think the impact of Jimmer is special because he created a generation of BYU basketball fans. And just his amazing three-point shooting ability and his ability to finish at the rim. And he was a ball-dominant guard. I always hated it in the NBA where it was viewed as he's J.J. Redick, a spot-up shooter. It's like, no, that's not his game. He needs to have the ball in his hands a lot. And the NBA just couldn't wrap their mind around that concept with him, and it didn't work out there. But at BYU, he was on top of the world, and some of the wins too. You know, BYU, it's a program and athletic department where it feels like, Nate, they get into the biggest stages and you feel like, is BYU going to do it? Like, we've even seen it with this year's basketball team, football, and the Big 12 championship. Can they get over the hump? With Jimmer, you always felt like he's going to win. He's always going to find a way. You know, you go to San Diego State on national TV, and BYU wins that game in San Diego. And at that point, you're talking about BYU as a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament that year because of that win and the resume that they had built to that point. And then, of course, things went a little bit south with the suspension of Brandon Davies. But still, Jimmer Fredette was always clutch in the biggest of moments, and he just had a kind personality. He looked like a guy that you played church ball with. Like, he had so much appeal, and I think the nation was just captivated by Jimmer Fredette.
You know who wasn't captivated, Mitch?
Who?
Michelle Peralta. I had to just bring her out.
Yes.
That's
a great pull. I remember Michelle Peralta Day very well. Just reading that story and thinking, are you kidding me? How can you hate Jimmer Fredette?
I would love to know what her thoughts are on Jimmer today, because somewhere she's talking to her kids, this Jimmer Fredette, I remember back when I was at BYU, and she's just going to have this big, long story, and her kids are going to go, Jimmer's awesome, Mom.
Jimmer is awesome. And what's your favorite Jimmer moment or game?
Oh, man, there's so many. It's so hard to pick. Obviously, the game at Arizona stands out.
Yeah.
I think the NCAA tournament game against Gonzaga stands out. I'm going to go with a personal favorite, and it was not even a game I was at. So you mentioned the game at San Diego State. BYU's playing on the mountain, Jimmer's senior season, and they happened to get this game on CBS. And it worked out great because my family was going on a cruise. So we were staying at a hotel in Houston, and my family decided to go to the Space Museum. And I was like, there's no way I'm going because I got to watch this BYU San Diego State game. So I stayed back. I'm in the hotel room, and I was 15 years old at the time, and I'm just pumped, right? Because BYU's top 10, they're taking down Kawhi Leonard and San Diego State, and they're on the verge of getting a 1 seed. And so I'm cheering, I'm clapping, I'm jumping up and down, and they get a knock on my door, and I go to the front, and they're like, hey, it was the hotel lobby receptionist desk, and they're like, hey, we've got some noise complaints. You're going to have to kind of tone it down a little bit. And I was like, they don't understand what's going on here. There's no way I could tone this down. So that's a personal favorite of mine. Obviously, the rest of the trip got sour because when I was gone is when the Brandon Davies news broke. So I get home from my cruise, and I'm pretty pumped to be a 1 seed in the tournament. And all of a sudden, they dropped the game to San Diego or to New Mexico, and they kind of went downhill after that, bitch. But the San Diego State game sticks out for me personally. The game at San Diego State.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love the 52-point performance too against New Mexico, where he knocks down. He just lights out from the field. He only had 1 free throw in that game. Jimmer was so efficient. There were games where he had high volume and he'd fire it up, but he always got the points necessary for BYU to have a chance to win games. And I really think that he gave BYU basketball a belief that they could win at the highest levels. And I think, the West Coast Conference era was kind of, a tough time for BYU basketball, but there was just that feeling that Jimmer gave you a taste and they wanted more and more. And BYU basketball was getting more resources, and it's really gotten to an even higher level in the Big 12 Conference. But Jimmer Fredette, remarkable player. Cannot wait to see him and his family, Whitney Fredette, his kids, get recognized today at the Marriott Center because he is an all-timer, and he deserves to be up there with Danny Ainge, Kresimir Kosic, Roland Minson, Mel Hutchins, an all-time legend in BYU basketball history. Let's take a break. You'll hear from Jimmer's head coach, former head coach, next. Dave Rose here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Ritchie right to the rim, driving score!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here's your host, Mitch Harper, on Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday here on KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, and it's Jimmer Fredette Day as BYU basketball gears up for the Colorado Buffaloes. Tip-off at 2 o'clock, but at halftime, Jimmer Fredette will be honored and have his jersey in the rafters at the Marriott Center. And last night, he and his family got the chance to see his jersey, the first glimpse at that uniform. They're hanging the jersey that Jimmer wore from his freshman to junior year, which I thought was interesting, not the senior year threads. That's going up in the rafters at the Marriott Center. It's a special moment. It's a special time. And a man that knows Jimmer Fredette better than anyone else from his time at BYU is head coach Dave Rose. And I caught up with Coach Rose and talked to him about how Jimmer getting this honor after the 15-year wait kind of feels like a first-time Hall of Fame inductee. This is Coach Rose.
Yeah, well, I think we all kind of knew that, we've retired a couple numbers at BYU, and it took a long time to actually do that. Mm-hmm. The fact that we have any numbers retired there is pretty special. But, when you look at what the past guys had done to get their numbers retired, and then what Jimmer had accomplished, and at least I knew that it would happen. It was just a matter of when.
I'm curious, Coach, again, talking with former BYU basketball head coach Dave Rose here on KSL. What was your first memory of Jimmer? Was it through a highlight tape? Was it, and I'm talking when he was a recruit, like when was the first time you learned about this Glens Falls, New York kid in Jimmer Fredette?
Yeah, well, for me, I had heard of him, and I had a couple coaches had seen him at different large events, just kind of, he was just such a young guy. But for me personally, he showed up to our BYU summer camp, our boys basketball camp, and it was I think I had a couple coaches during the lunch break, maybe the first day. He said, "Hey, we've got this really young kid that's quite a player and can really shoot the ball." And so I showed up to his gym on the evening session when they were playing 5-on-5 games, and that's why that was the first time I watched him play. And I, really, and people think I'm, stretching the truth here, but it's really a lot closer to the truth than not. But I think I watched him 3 different games. I think I watched him that evening, and then the morning, and then the next evening session, and I don't think I saw him miss a shot. I mean, he missed a shot, but not a 3-point shot. And he really, really came prepared and shot the ball really well. And from then on, it was a matter of how many coaches we were going to go have see him play, because at every event that he was during open recruiting times, we were there to watch him.
I remember in his recruitment, I think he had it down to BYU and Siena. I think Fran McCaffrey was at Siena. Was it kind of sweating it out in hopes to get Jimmer, or did you always know that once you guys offered that you guys were going to get him?
No, we were sweating it out to the end. And, Fran and I have actually, we became great friends and are still really good friends today because of our time together recruiting Jimmer. We went there's so many different places and gyms, and but his mom was really set on having Jimmer stay home, and so that was the toughest part of the recruiting process. And Alan Kay are still dear friends today, and I'm really, really happy that she relented and allowed Jimmer to come out to Provo, and then we got Jimmer in a great situation, and then he just took off from there. It was a pretty special 4 years together. The first one was kind of a real challenge for him because it didn't go exactly how he wanted to. In today's world, if he would have had the first year that he had, I would have never seen him back the second year. So I was pretty glad that I coached what I coached, and that the kids made a commitment to us, and we got to have them for quite a while. Another really big, decision for him was whether to, stay in the NBA draft after his junior year or to return and come back. And when he made that, commitment to return for his senior year, I mean, he would have got drafted in that draft. It just wouldn't have been in a position that he wanted to be drafted. So he came back his senior year to try to improve his draft stock, and obviously an unbelievable senior year, and did really improve his draft stock.
It truly was a remarkable career. And when you bring up the freshman season, I always wonder, was that NCAA tournament game against Texas A&M, the first one in Anaheim, was that the kind of the moment where you're like, man, you always knew Jimmer was going to be awesome, but where he's like, man, he's going to be even better than maybe we realized, because he was so good in that game against A&M in the biggest stage.
Yeah, he was really good in that game. He had great games as a freshman, but he never started a game, and that was a big thing. That was tough, really tough on him. But we had a good group of returning upperclassmen, and and Jimmer played a really important role on that team, and would come off the bench and really spark this, and was a really, really great offensive player at a really young age. And so, but he told me after, you have a meeting after the season's over with all your players, and you bring them in, and you tell them, the goals that you have for them, and they'll tell you the goals they have for themselves. And Jimmer just flat said, "Coach, before we start, I'm going to tell you these. I got a list here," and he read them off, pulled out a piece of paper, and said, "These are the 10 or 5 things that I've got for how I want to improve on the defensive end, and these are the 5 things I want to do to improve on the offensive end. And you don't need to go recruit another point guard, because I'm going to be your starting point guard for the next 3 years." And I don't know if I really believed that when we walked out of that meeting, but that's for sure what happened.
Talking with former BYU basketball head coach Dave Rose here for a few more moments on KSL. And Coach, better than anyone, when it comes to jersey retirements, it's not easy, as we noted earlier. It also factors in how you are as a person away from the court. Jimmer, maybe just tell us about the type of character he showed day in, day out, on the court, off the court, when he was in your program, and what he's been like after his playing days have been over.
Well, people always ask me how Jimmer was able to be Jimmer. And a lot of it obviously is because he was a great talent and spent so much time, perfecting this craft. But Jimmer was able to be Jimmer because of the person that he was, because those guys on the team wanted Jimmer to be good, and wanted Jimmer, their games where, he has, 30 some odd points or 40 some odd points. It's really hard for teams to accept that guy doing all those things. And on our team, Jimmer was encouraged to do that. And I can remember the San Diego State game in the Marriott Center his senior year. And, we're not playing very well early in the game, and Jimmer hadn't taken many shots. And we call a timeout, and those guys are walking over to the bench, and I get Jimmer. I said, "Jimmer, it's time to go. Let's go." He said, "Well, I'm trying to get the rest of the guys going, Coach. We need to get everybody going." I said, "No, it's time for you just to take over this thing." And he did. And it worked out pretty good. So that was good for Jimmer.
Is that your favorite? I don't want to say Jimmer moment, but just maybe coaching him. Was that game your favorite game that he was part of in your time, or was there another game or two that really are atop the list of games that you coached him?
Yeah, it's so hard to say my favorite moment because there were so many, and I'm always, I love Jimmer, and what I really loved was after the season was over, we flew from city to city and collected all these awards, the Player of the Year award, the John Wooden award, the Adolph Rupp award. I mean, all these different things that went with big presentations and things, and it was just so fun and enjoyable to watch Jimmer receive those awards. But I think the thing that was there were just so many different experiences that he had, and watching him play on the court is obviously what we all remember, but you should have just seen him respond to the Jimmer mania. We ended up in TCU. I've told the story many times, but we ended up in TCU and at their game, and we had a great game. Ended up winning the game, and the place was packed, but it was probably 3-1 BYU fans compared to TCU fans. And after the game, they all lined up from the back of the arena all the way on both sides to the bus. And when we were walking out, Jimmer wanted to sign or autograph or talk to or shake hands with every single person. And I've got, all the players on the bus, and we've been in this line for 45 minutes or so trying to get them to come. And the players, probably the only time they got, extremely frustrated and wanted to get going and whatever. But he just wanted to spend time with and acknowledge all the BYU fans who came out to support him and to see him. And so from that day, we actually ended up having to prearrange how we were going to get the bus, and we didn't go through hotel lobbies. We went around the back and everything. And it was because if Jimmer saw a kid that wanted to talk to him, he would talk to him. And so the rest of the guys, we made it work for them too.
That's BYU head coach Dave Rose here on Cougar Sports Saturday as we gear up for Jimmer Fredette Day at the Marriott Center. More Cougar Sports Saturday next as we give you our score predictions for BYU in Colorado right here on KSL. Final segment today of Cougar Sports Saturday as we get you ready for BYU versus Colorado. Tip-off at 2 o'clock. Pre-game with Greg Wrubell and Mark Durant starts in a few moments here at the top of the hour at 1 o'clock, so we'll get you ready for that as the Cougs take on the Buffs. First time since 2016, Colorado comes to the Marriott Center. BYU got a big win last year over Colorado. If you remember, Nate, again, Mitch Harper, Nate Slack with you today. That was a game that kind of turned around BYU's season a little bit. I remember being in Boulder and Colorado was up big. I think they were up 14, and then BYU went on a 39-6 run and turned the season around, and Yegor Dioman had a excellent between-the-legs pass to Richie Saunders, and Saunders buried the three. It was a big win at Colorado. The Buffs aren't great this year, 14-11, 4-8 in Big 12 play, coming off a 34-point loss at Texas Tech earlier this week. Every Big 12 game is big, and BYU's looking for a perfect week after that big win over Baylor. Your thoughts on today's matchup against the Buffs?
Mitch, I think you know where I'm going with this one. If Texas Tech beats Colorado by 34, and before that, Baylor beat Colorado by 21 or by 19, I think BYU is going to win pretty handily today. I think the energy in the Marriott Center is going to be really solid. I think the matchup is good. I remember that game last year against Colorado, and that 39-6 run was insane. And then the run that BYU made after that Colorado game was also insane. I think BYU rattled off a handful of wins. Was that kind of the catalyst of that 8-game win streak, or am I mixing up my games?
No, it was a little bit earlier in the season. They won in January, and then they still had some losses against, Cincinnati, and then they lost to Arizona. But then after that Cincinnati loss in Ohio, BYU then reeled off 9 games. But the BYU Colorado game kind of avoided hitting rock bottom, was kind of the sentiment there, because they lost at TCU, they lost to Utah, and it was just like, can you win on the road? And they got that big win against a Colorado team that wasn't great, but they were down big, and they got that win, and it kind of just gave that feeling of, hey, you can win in Big 12 play on the road, and really kind of turned around, I think, BYU's ability to have success away from the Marriott Center.
It's kind of fitting, because that's kind of the sentiment I had heading into that Baylor game, right? Is this rock bottom? Can BYU win on the road? Can they compete this year? Are they just kind of falling apart? I think BYU answers big following that Baylor win. I've got BYU winning by 32 points, Mitch.
Whoa, 32.
I've got to say 32 for Jimmer Fredette night. I think Colorado's struggling this week. The last two games they've played, I think they're going to be coming into a buzzsaw. I think BYU handles this game by 32 points in honor of the great Jimmer Fredette.
I would love that. That would be poetic to see that be the score margin for BYU in a victory today. Some tidbits to know about Colorado. Players to watch: Barrington Hargris. He's number 1 in assist to turnover ratio in the Big 12. BYU faced him last year. He was a teammate of BYU guard Nate Pickens at UC Riverside. Pretty good player. He shoots 50% from the field in league play, so he's one of their top guys. Isaiah Johnson's their leading scorer at 16.6 points per game. And then Bangot Dak, number 9, a tall, long body. He's one to watch. He's a good player. BYU faced him last year. He gets about 6 rebounds per game. I want to see BYU's big three get the ability to have some breathers and not be expected to, have a 40-minute day. Ideally, if they deliver the outcome you're predicting, Nate, a 32-point win, that should be a recipe for AJ and Richie and Rob Wright to get some rest and be able to enjoy their weekend and have an early day at the office, if you will, against this Colorado team, because against Baylor, AJ and Rob Wright had to go a full 40 minutes, and I think it's necessary for BYU moving forward for those guys to be on the court as much as possible. But if you can have opportunities to pull away and get some blowouts, that would be nice.
Well, especially heading into next week when you've got games at Arizona and home against Iowa State. Those are difficult games, and you don't want to have to go into that difficult week with games where AJ and Rob had to play full 40-minute games. Richie played, I think it was 36 on Tuesday night. So you definitely don't want that to happen. I think they can avoid having a close game, but I mean, after the Oklahoma State game, I guess you don't really know, because the first half woes have been kind of a story throughout the year. The defense looked better on Tuesday night, but is it sustainable, or are the problems fixed? I think it's probably still too early to tell, but I think this could be a good test to show how far BYU's come over the last week and what they're going to look like going forward.
And it would be a game, too, where I want to see Keba Keita get back to the Keita that we saw to begin Big 12 play against K-State. I want to see a double-double type game from Keba Keita again. I think it's important for him.
What do you think it is? What do you think the deal is with Keita? Do you think it's an injury? Do you think it's a mental thing? Do you think it's just his role is different? Because I've had some thoughts on maybe the way that Dallin Hall and Yegor Dioman played with him last year was a lot of pick and roll action. They really took advantage of his size and his athleticism. He doesn't get as much of that this year. Do you think it's just how the offense is ran? Do you think it's an injury? What do you think is the deal with Keita this season?
I think it's maybe just not as much spacing, with Dallin Hall and Yegor Dioman. They were actively looking for those pick and roll, rim rolling 5 action where they're lobbing it to the basket. That's not really Rob Wright's game, where he's putting up alley-oops to Keba Keita. There's been some moments where Rob's had that, but he's a paint touch guard where he's going to get in traffic and create in there, and maybe that's just been a little bit of an adjustment for Keita this season. There's maybe not as much space in that paint area that he occupied a lot last year to kind of roam, and he's kind of adjusting into Rob Wright. But that Houston game last week, I thought he was hearing footsteps the way that he was shooting the basketball. 1 of 6 from Keba Keita, who's one of the great shooters, honestly, in terms of field goal percentage, not a great shooter, but he's a guy that's highly efficient. That was shocking to see him go 1 of 6. So I want to see him get right, and I think that would be great to see today. My score prediction for this one, not as big as 32 points, but I am saying a big win for BYU. 95 BYU, 78 Colorado. Cougs win by 17. That's going to do it for today's edition of Cougar Sports Saturday. For Nate Slack, Mitch Harper, we'll toss it over to Greg Wrubell, Mark Durant, and the BYU Sports Network for BYU versus Colorado here on KSL News Radio.